We've had Alleen Brown on before. She's a New York-based reporter for The Intercept. She focuses on environmental justice issues, and right now she has a series out, a brand new series titled Climate and Punishment. It's jarring, frankly. Alleen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is obviously a beat that you've been working on for a while, but I'm actually quite shocked that there hasn't been any reporting on, extensive reporting at least, on how the criminal justice system it pushes up against climate. And to see what you've come out with, it seems it's already a rough human rights situation in so many prisons across this country. Add to it how climate is affecting it seems hard to ignore. So what led you in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was exactly what you're talking about. I think increasingly when a big hurricane happens, when a wildfire happens, and it's impacting people who are incarcerated, in the rare cases that people who are incarcerated or advocates connect with the media, you more and more see these fast pieces kind of reacting to these crises. And so I really wanted to find a way to do something that stepped back a little bit and looked more comprehensively about how the climate crisis is impacting detention facilities. So, I started talking to my colleague, senior research engineer Akil Harris, about potentially doing something with all these data sets, combining these data sets of we have one with 6,500 detention facilities from the Department of Homeland Security. And then there's lots of data sets looking at, flood risk, wildfire risk, storm risk, heat risk. I thought we could find a way to put these things together. So Akil is amazing with data, and he was really the one who created this big interactive map where you can search almost any detention facility in the US and find out what kind of heat risk, wildfire risk, and flood risk it has.
How are you able to even get that data?
It really relied on partnerships with people who have been working with each of these individual areas. Mm-hmm. So there's a team of researchers at UCLA led by Nick Shapiro. They're called the Carceral Ecologies Project, and Nick had already been looking at the way this big database of facilities was being impacted by other kinds of environmental issues, like water quality issues. So the Carceral Ecologies folks were really key to figuring out how to work with the prison data. And then, for heat data, we worked with Union of Concerned Scientists, this really great nonprofit that had looked at county by county heat data and how the heat is going to increase in the coming years as the climate crisis deepens. For the flood data, we teamed up with an organization called the First Street Foundation that has property-specific risk ratings, more for residential properties, but we found a way to make it work for these prison campuses. And then finally, the federal government put together a wildfire risk database a couple years ago, and we worked closely with their contractor, Pyrologics. This guy, Joe Scott, is a really great wildfire researcher who helped us figure out how to work with the wildfire data. So, it was really a lot of people involved in making this happen.
So let's start with the heat risk. What kind of things did you discover?
Yeah, I mean, so we discovered there people who are incarcerated are already facing really severe issues with heat. We found that about a third of the detention facilities across the U.S. already are located in counties that see more than 50 days a year with heat indexes over 90 degrees, which is enough to make people dealing with a range of health issues quite sick. A lot of these facilities don't have air conditioning. That's something that our data doesn't quite capture, is which facilities have the infrastructure to manage some of these problems and which don't at all. We also found that the number of facilities at that heat level will rise to about 3/4 of the detention facilities currently existing in the US by 2100. Even more worrisome, perhaps, today no carceral institution is located in a county with more than 50 days a year at 105 degrees, which is a level that the National Weather Service considers dangerous. By 2100, almost 700 facilities will be, mostly in Texas, Florida, Louisiana. So, this is already a really severe problem, and it's about to get much worse.
I mean, we're looking at the map right now for our podcast listeners, and I'm just floored by how many prisons there are in this country and jails. I mean, I know this isn't even a complete map, and when you see it visually and just how many are in your town, like if you zoom into Arizona right now, I mean, there's only so many cities in Arizona. You hear about the large prisons, but it's really jarring, and I'm sure that there's many that aren't even on this map. Wow.
Yeah.
So, in terms of wildfire risk, wildfires are obviously happening all throughout the year now, we're learning. How does that impact a prison? And what did you learn?
Yeah. So, we focused especially on California in our reporting, since California has been so, deeply impacted by wildfires. And I think that's where we're starting to see some people organize around issues of wildfires. And I can talk a little bit about that. But I would also say that one of the most notable things, or one of the most surprising things to me, was the way that the wildfire risk that facilities across the U.S. are facing, particularly Florida. I think Florida had more state facilities facing extreme wildfire risk than California. It doesn't get a lot of attention for this, but the vegetation on top of some of these swampy areas is hot enough to kind of travel across that wet landscape. And actually right now, Florida is facing some pretty significant wildfires that have caused, can't remember if it's a jail or a prison, but a detention facility to evacuate.
Interesting.
Of course, the surrounding
and that's the Panhandle.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, the surrounding community began to evacuate, at least several days before the detention facility was finally evacuated. So I would say that, oh, go ahead.
And when prisoners voice concern, I mean, I know this is in your reporting, what are they met with? I mean, do they have advocates fighting for them on being able to evacuate if there's a fire risk? This is insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people's biggest advocates are always family members. It's often loved ones and family members that are connecting to advocates with more access to, policymakers. So via those loved ones advocacy, there has started to be some organizing around getting facilities evacuated when wildfires are in the area. You increasingly see people, I think in California for one of the fires in the last couple of years, people actually showed up to the head of the corrections department's home, kind of demanding evacuations. But, evacuations still tend to be much more rare for detention facilities than for the surrounding communities. And the corrections departments tend to be very sort of hesitant to share information about what their emergency plans are, what their evacuation plans are. A lot of people just don't, without transparency, a lot of people don't believe that they're very robust.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Okay. And in terms of flooding, I can imagine many parts of the country are going to be severely affected by climate change and floods.
Yeah. So we identified more than 600 facilities across the U.S. Facing major to extreme flood risk. We really honed in on one facility in Florida that experienced flooding this past year. That's the Cross City Detention Facility, or it's a state prison. And
where's that? In Florida, for context.
Yep, that's in Florida. It's
and where in Florida? Where in Florida?
Yeah, so it's kind of I don't know if it's quite the Panhandle, but it's sort of in that inner arc along the Gulf Coast. And it's in a quite rural county, Dixie County, that flooded really severely over the summer, but got hardly any national attention. This county, a lot of the county's economy relies on the prison,
right.
to function. And so as people's homes were being inundated, the prison was too. One person who was incarcerated said that his cell was flooded with ankle deep water, with human waste floating in the water, and was stuck there for several hours before there was an evacuation. But one thing I think that it is really important to note, especially where it comes to flooding, is that it's not just facilities that we identified as having significant flood risk that are flooding. Cross City does have severe flood risk according to our database. However, we noted a number of facilities with a history of flooding that don't have high flood risk. The issue is not that they're in a flood risky area. It's that the infrastructure itself can't handle, storms and precipitation events.
Oh, that's interesting. So they were never designed to deal with any sort of extreme weather, and now with more extreme weather, it's further pushing it to the limits. Have you been able to document? I know it's sometimes difficult with climate change, but have you been able to document any deaths related to climate change in these facilities, at least over the past few years?
I think that where you see the most deaths is where it comes to extreme heat events.
Right.
It's actually the deaths of incarcerated people in Texas that have forced the state to begin to install air conditioning in more facilities. They're way behind on that. But I would also say that with heat, a lot of times a death that might be associated with heat is not documented as such. You might have an existing health problem that's really exacerbated by being in a place with no air conditioning for an extended period of time, or that's exacerbated by a sudden spike in heat, a sudden heat wave that your body isn't prepared to handle. If you have a heart attack and it happens to be on a hot day, the corrections department isn't necessarily going to document it as it's being heat related.
I'm shocked. Has there been any, since you've been doing this reporting, you mentioned Texas is starting to install air conditioners, but have you seen any other sort of progress? Any organizations speaking out? Anything?
Yeah, so I would say that people are increasingly organizing around this issue. I mentioned California. There's a coalition called Curb that is demanding, they're saying that they don't want California facilities to invest in infrastructure and repairs. Rather, they want 10 facilities closed in the next 5 years. And one of the things that they're focused on is kind of environmental problems, the impact of the wildfires. In some places, generators have failed as the wildfires strike. So this infrastructure issue is a real problem. They don't want the state to pour money into infrastructure. They want facilities shut down. The other place I would note is again, Texas. Family members and loved ones of people who have been impacted by the heat while incarcerated have really started to organize around, or have organized for the past few years around Texas installing air conditioning in its state prisons. It's really a grassroots effort that's led by the loved ones of incarcerated people or formerly incarcerated people.
Jesus. This is really important reporting. Thank you so much, Alleen, for bringing this to light and for sharing it. And I hope, as you continue to learn more, please share it with us, because we'd love to get the word out as much as possible. Alleen Brown, thank you, as always, for joining us. You can go check out the Climate and Punishment series at The Intercept. Alleen is a reporter for The Intercept, and she focuses on environmental justice issues. Go check out her reporting there. It's really in-depth and wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
If you're not already, please make sure to support us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. That is how we fund the show. Make sure to like and subscribe. You got to get those likes and subscribes up. We've put a lot of thought and effort on what it means to do this show and to be in solidarity with other hosts and what kind of guests we have on. But we're only able to do that because we have patrons.